Now we're ready to put decorative paper on our towers, and in the cutting guide there's a section named Decorative Paper, and one thing to be aware of is not all the components of our castle are listed, but the tower pieces are, and for each of the components it tells how many pieces of paper you'll need, the height and the length, and then if there's any scoring involved. For example, here for the back corner towers we need 2 pieces, and these are the papers that I've chosen from my back corner towers. They need to be 6.5 inch tall by 8 inches long, and that's what these papers are. And then the scoring, and let's just score one of these. The first score is at 1/2 inch. And then 2 3/8, 4 1/4, and 6 1/8. Now these scorings have been set so that they will wrap around each of the towers. For example, this back corner tower is 1 7/8 on each side, so the scorings are 1 7/8 apart, and that will allow us to give us 1/2 inch to start with, and then easily wrap around the other sides. You'll notice that the paper goes only to the top and the bottom. There's no wrapping involved with these towers. And then for prepping of the paper, on the paper itself, I've just put a strip of score tape along each of the vertical edges. And then for the tower, I've put score tape on each side of the corners, and then on 2 of the sides at the base I've put some score tape in the middle because this is where the walls will come in, and so I keep track of which walls that is. On the top I've put some arrows so that when I go to put this together I'll know which way to orient it. So I'm just going to wrap my tower. I will crease these folds that I made with my bone folders so they're nice and crisp. And one other thing I want to do is on the last edge here is to take some ink right along that edge so I won't see the white of the paper there. So I'll wrap my back corner towers and then I'll be back for the next tower. So here are my 2 back corner towers, and I made sure to burnish them well on each of their 4 sides, and I have them marked on the top with their arrows so that when I put the back wall in and the 2 side walls, that the sides with the score tape on them will be in the proper positions. Next we'll work on our tall tower, and for the tall tower we're cutting a piece that is 12 inches high by 9.5 inches wide, and then the scoring, because this tower is rectangular, we have sides that are 2 5/8 and sides that are 1 7/8. So our scoring here is first 1/2 inch, that's our wrap scoring. And then next 3 1/8, that'll be for one of the longer sides. And then 5. And finally 7 5/8. So I'll go ahead and crease on all of those. I've again prepped my ends with score tape. And then on the tower itself, On one of the wide sides, I've run some tape up here. This is the side that's going to connect to the interior structure, so we want to have some good score tape there. And then on the two narrow sides at the bottom, I've put some 1-inch tape because the walls will come in and join there. So I'm using directional paper, so I'll want to pay attention to that. And I'll also get a red marker and hit my long edge there as well. So I have put on the top here of my tower an arrow so that I know which side of my long sides has the extra score tape on it. So I'll go ahead and cover that piece now. So I just want to show you how I'm going to cover this because it's kind of a big piece and I find it harder to do them vertically. So what I've done is I've done all of my creasing here, of course, and I don't have any score tape removed at this point. And I've just set the tower down inside of that scoring, tight up against the creases, and then I'm watching this bottom edge here. This is my bottom over on to my right here, and I'll make sure I've got this crease well here, and then we can just take off just on the edge that's going to fold over. To start with, make sure everything is tight up against where you want it, going all the way around. And then just pull and do this tab to begin with. And once you've got that side started, then it's pretty easy to wrap the rest and keep it straight. So that's just a little hint for doing this tall tower. And here's the tall tower all covered. And you can see the arrow up here at the top so that I know which side fits towards the interior structure. Next we'll work on the turret. And because the turret, when it goes on, this part down here at the bottom on the long side gets attached to the interior structure, there's no need really to cover that with paper. And in order to conserve some of this paper, that's why I've chosen to cover this in two pieces. And so what we'll basically do is wrap the three sides here and then put a short piece up here at the top, leaving the middle portion of this back bare. So the decorative paper cutting guide calls for two different sizes of paper. One that is larger, and that's turret piece 1. You can see I have it here on my scoreboard. And then these two smaller turret piece 2s. So we'll start by doing some scoring on turret piece 1. And we'll score at 1/2. And then at 2 1/8. And then 3 3/4. And 5 3/8. And go ahead and bend and crease those with your bone folder. So I've done my creasing here, and the way this is going to work is we'll wrap this around the side that has the slanty part here. And so we want to make a couple of release cuts here at the bottom so that we'll be able to bend that or around there. So this top piece measures 4 1/2, and so we want to know where to cut that. So I'm just taking my pen with this or a pencil, you can do with it kind of folded there, so that I can put some dark lines, hopefully you can see them, where the creases are on the inside, and that'll help me figure out where I want to do my cutting. Now, coming down from the top, I want to measure 4.5. I'm actually going to go a 1/16 more than 4.5. It's a little hard to see on this paper, but it's right there. And then I'll just make 2 release cuts up right along the creases up to that point. And I can easily do that by just folding this to make sure that I have my straight edge right on that crease, and then going ahead and cutting. So now when we put this on here, we can see that we have this piece that can bend down. Now the next thing is that you can see on these sides that we have plenty of extra paper. We only need to wrap about 1/2 inch or so. So I'm just going to come in here and sketch with my pen, or you can use a pencil, of course. I'm just using a pen so that you can see it. And that can be where I will cut off the side. I'll do the same thing over on this side. Bring that right up to the top edge here. And then kind of just sketch about 1/2 inch or so down there. And I can go ahead and cut those off. So after I cut those 2 edges off, I ran some score tape along them, as you can see here. I've also run some score tape around this central part up to where that slit is cut. And I want to pick a coordinating marker and make sure I get the edge of that kind of flap that we've got there. So I'll get that done. And then I'll wrap the 3 sides, remembering that this side with a long tab goes on this piece that's like shorter and then slanted. Don't put it on the back here, so that it's going on like so. So I'll go ahead and wrap those 3 sides. So now that I have the 3 sides wrapped, I'm going to make a diagonal cut into this corner. And then I'll be able to first wrap the corner that's down here on this part. And then I'm just going to trim off some of this excess right there so that I have a kind of a point going on. Hopefully you can see that. And bring that down. And then I'll just trim this back at a little bit of an angle. And just in case that wants to show, I'm going to hit that white edge with a little bit of black ink. And then finally I can wrap this side to the back. And we'll repeat that on this other side. Make the diagonal cut, wrap, remove any excess down here. And then finally, to finish this flap, we'll bend this around all the way. And just angle back these 2 corners so they won't show. And I'll hit those 2 corners with some ink. Then I remove my score tape backing. Make sure I'm getting that centered. And then go ahead and give everything a good burnish. And then finally, to finish up the top on the back, I've got one of my small pieces. I've added some extra score tape to this one end. That end goes towards the bottom. I've blackened my vertical edges, and then I'll center this and give that piece a good burnish as well. And so here are our two turrets covered and ready to go. And our last two rectangular towers are the Courtyard Towers, and we need two pieces, 4 1/4 by 7, and then we will score at 1/2, 2 1/8, 3 3/4, and 5 3/8. And then I've put my back score tape on the two vertical ends and then covered the tower just like I did for the back corner towers. And I will use some green ink on this last edge that will get put down. So I'll go ahead and cover the two Courtyard Towers. And here are our two Courtyard Towers covered with paper. Now we're ready to cover our two pedestals, and on our decorative paper guide there are pieces listed for the tops and the walls, and here you can see that there's two pieces for the tops. They're cut 2 3/4 by 3, and then two pieces for the walls that are cut 2 by 3. Now for the scoring, for the tops it says to see the video, so we'll put those aside for a minute. And for the walls it says 3/8 and then 2 5/8. And if we score at 3/8 and then at 2 5/8, that will give us interior space that is 2 1/4, which will fit around our pedestal. So I'll repeat that for the other piece. And then for the tops, I'm going to start out with the 3-inch side across the top and score that at 3/8 and 2 5/8, and that will give us our 2 1/4 inch channel. Then I'm going to flip it around so the 2 3/4 inch side is at the top, and I'll score that at 3/8 and then 2 3/8. So what we get in essence is a 3/8 inch tab all around. So I'll repeat that for my other piece. So I've prepped the top of my pedestal with score tape, and I had 2-inch wide tape, so I used that. If you don't have 2-inch wide, you'll want to have pretty good coverage here, because the Courtyard Tower will sit down and be attached to this, so use multiple strips to get pretty good coverage here. And then on my top pieces of decorative paper, I've cut out the corners, and I cut out I folded in on the score lines and put some score tape on those tabs. And then I'm just coming in, I'm not going to cut directly on the score lines for the corners, but just kind of at a slight angle in both directions. And that will allow this top piece to fit down on top of there. Now we will be cutting out for this corner here in a second. So what we want to do first is we'll leave the tape backing on the tabs, and we'll just go ahead and fit that down right on top of our pedestal. Then make sure you give that a good burnish, and we'll just flip this over, and we'll cut right along that edge of that chipboard, And when we reach the tabs, we'll come not directly perpendicular, just kind of at a slight angle there. Hopefully you'll be able to see this once I get it done. So I think you can see how I've angled that slightly back there, and I've done that on both sides here. And this side here is cut right against that chipboard. So now I can release these score tape backings on all the tabs and put those tabs down. And once our top is on, we can add score tape around the side that we wrote paper on when we built this, and our little side paper wall will fit right on there. Now I've angled back the top corners slightly here on both sides, and then I've also used a marker to get rid of that white edge on the top. So first I'll remove this score tape backing and put the piece on the side, and then I can release and add the two tabs. So here's the completed left pedestal. I gave everything a good burnish, and I'll probably do some inking around the edges here. And I'll repeat all these steps for the right pedestal. You can see I've already prepped this side with some score tape, but because we wrote that word paper on there to begin with, that will ensure that we get our mirror images. And here are the completed pedestals, and as you can see, they are mirror images. Now for the round towers, there isn't any scoring, of course, because they're round. And for the front corner towers, we have two of them, and I've cut my paper 5 1/4 inch tall, which is the height of our towers, and then 7 inches long. And you can see I've just wrapped score tape around going this way, and that's because we've got some walls coming into these, and I thought it would be easier than trying to guess where the walls would come on these cylinders. So I'm going to start my paper by just butting it up against where the seam was for the cardstock joining strip, just so I won't have extra bulk, and that'll give me a nice straight area to put that on. I've got score tape on my two edges here, and again I will use some black marker on the end that will be on the outside, just so that we won't see that white edge. And I'll just wrap around, keeping the top and the bottom edges even. So here are my two front corner towers, and if you're using paper that has a direction, make sure you mark top on the side so that they're both facing the same direction. So here are the two center wall towers, and the paper I'm going to use for those. We'll wrap them the same way we just did for the corner towers. And then this is the second level tower, and it gets wrapped the same way. I do want to say that in order to conserve some paper, this paper that I want to use on this tower is the reverse side of that paper I used for the turrets and the front corner tower. So what I did was I just patched a little piece here that's a 1/2 inch long, and when this wraps around here, we'll end up with two seams that are about 1/4 inch away, and I'll just make sure that they are facing towards the inside of the project, and no one will be the wiser, and that way I've conserved some paper for this one. So I'll just wrap both of those the same way, and this one doesn't have anything adhering to it in the middle, so I didn't put an extra piece of score tape in the center, but you certainly could do so if you'd like to. And here are the final round towers.